I'm Irina Bokova. I was 2 terms Director General of UNESCO, the United Nations Organization for Education, Culture, Sciences and Communication, from 2009 to 2017. And currently I'm member of the board of the Ban Ki-moon Center for Global Citizens and also Honorary Dean of the Humanities College at Kyunhee University.
Irina Bokova, thank you so much for taking the time to visit the Institute for Global Engagement and Empowerment at Yonsei University and also being part of our special interview series on sustainable development.
Thank you for the invitation.
We are honored to have you. So for our audience who are not familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals or the SDGs, could you explain it to us briefly, maybe within 15 seconds?
Within 15 seconds, I would say that Sustainable Development Goals, it is about reconciling the economic, social, and environmental concerns, including climate change. And if I have 5 more seconds, I would say leave no one behind. This inclusiveness is very important.
Very good. And you actually reiterated that during your speech earlier this year at the session at the United Nations, and I quote, you said, "Sustainability begins with social equity and justice." Explain to us more on why.
I believe nowadays when we speak about globalization, about connectivity, about economic growth, when we speak about new technologies, all of this has a meaning if it serves people. And it serves people also on an equitable basis. We have to make this work for as many people as possible in order for them to have jobs, to have decent life, in order for them to have education, in order to have to enjoy the fruits and the benefits of culture, of science, and of course to tackle the issues of climate, which are affecting practically everybody. And we know that the most vulnerable are the poorest of the poor. And also because I believe that global challenges like climate change have a very deep ethical dimension. I'm very proud that during my tenure at UNESCO, when I was Director General, during the last conference, last November, member states adopted for the first time ever a declaration on the ethical dimension of climate change. And I believe all the issues of sustainable development and climate, on equity and justice, were included into this, so that nowadays economy and technology works for inclusion and for equity.
Great. And yes, you served at UNESCO for a very long time. You led UNESCO, and I will have to ask a few questions about education. When it comes to the role of universities, higher education, what would it be in furthering the SDGs or implementing the SDGs?
I believe that the role of education, and particularly I would say in this case universities, is critical in this process. On one side, I believe universities are integral part. They are not a silver tower, an ivory tower by themselves. Universities, science serve societies. And that is why the interface between science, governments and society is so important, and universities play critical role in that process. On the other side, we need a lot more of thinking of how to implement the Sustainable Development Goals, and in fact how to ensure this link, how to reconcile exactly the economic, the social and the environment, how to bridge sometimes the divide. That is why universities, where they have all the disciplines, they can bridge this divide, they can serve as one science, and of course educate young people into their responsibilities as the generation to take the destiny of the world, humanity, in their hands.
Koreans take education very seriously. In fact, in a recent report, Korea topped the list of most educated country in the world with 70% of its 25 to 34-year-old holding a college degree or equivalent thereof. But what's troubling is that the unemployment rate among that same age group is 9.3%. Just looking at the focus of education, What do you make of this phenomenon, and how do you think we should address it?
I know that education has played a hugely important role for the transformation of the Korean society all these years after the Korean War, and how much the Korean society cares about education. I remember during one of my visits as Director General of UNESCO, it was a big humanities forum in Busan. We were together with the then Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. The National Commission for Korea found out and presented to Mr. Ban and to myself 2 copies of a textbook that Mr. Ban was studying when he was a child. I took this book, I went back to Paris to the headquarters, and I put in the entrance a special postament under a glass cover, and I put down that this is the book that Mr. Ban has studied, which was a very powerful, I think, symbol that the boy at those times when Korea was very impoverished and devastated by the war could become one day, thanks to education, a Secretary General of the United Nations. And it is not by chance that we had here in 2015 in Incheon our biggest conference. It was the Education Forum, where we adopted goal number 4 on the Sustainable Development Agenda about equitable and quality education and lifelong learning for all. So to sum it up, I think what is important nowadays to mention that I don't know of any single country, developed or least developed, that there are no debates around how to reform the education, what kind of education for the 21st century. Because it is not simply about the transfer of knowledge. Knowledge is everywhere. Technologies are transforming also education. But it is very much about the skills, the new skills for a new economy. Economy that is either green economy or economy that is transformed by these new technologies, and that requires the skills that previously were not even known to us. So I think these parallel processes which go with the reform of technology and economy and the reform of the education will bring more about inclusiveness. And the last but not least, today's education in a globalized world, in an interconnected world, requires a lot of I would say other skills which are linked to values, to understanding of the world, of understanding of the nature, of the biodiversity, of sustainability, of living together. And this is where the new concept that I'm very much attached to, and we launched during the elaboration of goal number 4, it is about global citizenship education. And both of them are promoted by Korea through the Asia-Pacific Center for Education for International Understanding under the auspices of UNESCO, who is doing the pioneering work in this area.
You come to Seoul or Korea very often. You actually hold a position at Kyunghee University, a chair professor. What is it about Korea that has you dedicate so much of your time and energy? I know you're very, very busy.
Well, Korea has always fascinated me. It may start with the Korean food, Korean culture. I think what is fantastic about the Korean society is that on one side, Korean people are very much attached to their heritage, to their history. At UNESCO, we every year celebrate the Korean Prize for Literacy, King Sejong Prize. This is also a fascinating story, how a king, a leader, was not just caring about the people, but he was really enlightening the people by creating the alphabet, launching it, opening libraries, encouraging science and reading. I think it's a good example even for nowadays leaders. But also Korea could reconcile this history and tradition attachment with modernity. You may have the most modern things here, the Korean hip-hop, or you have the Korean fashion, or the Korean art and creativity and design. So I think this combination has always fascinated me and can show that you may come from an old culture, you may preserve it, you should be proud of it, but you also can be a modern human being and society. I think it's fantastic.
Great. Before I ask you the last question, is there anything that you would like to add, anything I left out that you think is important?
Well, maybe you did not ask me whether I have been in Yonsei University, and I would like to add it because I'm very happy to be here again this year for a second time. The first time we had here a very important conference on sustainable development and the launching of the international the Center for the Global Leadership and Engagement. I think this is a very important place, and we also, parallel to that, we had meeting of the Ban Ki-moon Center for Global Citizens. I'm very honored to be sitting on the board of this important institution. I know that, and tomorrow I will be also going once again to the global campus, and I hope that by this I can contribute to the same quest of Yonsei University, as I'm doing currently in my capacity as honorary Mi-1 professor and honorary dean of the Humanities College at Kyunhei, to not just raise the awareness about the Sustainable Development Agenda, but also to try to mobilize and to look for solutions and to participate in this very important debate. So I'm very happy to be here.
Great. I hope this is not the last time that you visit Yonsei. I'm sure there are many more to come.
I hope so also.
Great. My last question. Any word of advice for Yonsei students who are getting ready to go out to the real world?
Well, I would say to the students to be very audacious, to be very interested in the United Nations, in the work of the United Nations, in the multilateralism. I think that the global challenges today require global solutions, and young people are those who are finding these global solutions. I believe the United Nations and your eminent compatriot, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, has made an enormous effort and a great achievement in the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals, the Agenda 2030, but also the Paris Climate Agreement. And I'm sure that you are the ones that will also push governments, and you will be one of those to implement these two very important agreements, international agreements. So please continue and become a true multilateralist.